As we continue to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, we're now joined by best-selling and award-winning author Reyna Grande, who recently released her new book, A Ballad of Love and Glory. Reyna, thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm happy to be here.
First, let's get into your brand new book here. What inspired you to write this novel that is based on true events and true figures?
Yeah, the novel is about the U.S. invasion of Mexico in 1846. And what inspired me to write it was learning about the St. Patrick's Battalion, which was a unit in the Mexican army of deserters from the U.S. Army, and most of them were Irish. And I was really fascinated learning the history because I didn't really learn much about the U.S. invasion of Mexico or the Mexican-American War. And when I heard about the St. Patrick's Battalion, I was really intrigued learning that there were these foreign soldiers who risked their lives to desert the U.S. Army and switch sides to defend Mexico against the United States.
So incredible. So you actually doing your own history dive helped lead you to and inspired you to write this newest book.
Yeah. I spent 7 years researching.
Wow,
I
7
read
years.
over 100 books, and I really feel that I understood this moment in history. And it was very heartbreaking to learn about how the U.S. invaded Mexico, provoked a war with Mexico with the aims of taking half of Mexico's northern territories, including California.
So over 100 books later, 7 years of history and research, now you have this wonderful novel here. What else went into the creative process of writing this book?
So the story is a war story. It's also a love story between John Riley, who was the leader of the St. Patrick's Battalion, and he's a real historical figure, and he falls in love with the Mexican army nurse, who's a fictional character inspired by the poem by John Greenleaf Whittier, The Angels of Buena Vista. And so combining the history or a historical figure with a fictional character was challenging, but it was also really fun to try to mix these two together and see, like, see this romance bloom between these two characters and how they help each other survive this invasion.
Well, I'd love to talk about that challenge that you just mentioned, combining fiction and facts. How did you find the balance to do both to write the novel?
Well, I feel that, a history book will tell you what happened, but a novel shows you how it felt. And so that's what I focused on as I was writing the book, was really immersing the reader in this war and allowing the reader to experience it through the eyes of John Riley and Jimena, my Mexican character. And as you're reading the novel, you really do feel that devastation. You feel what it's like for your country to be invaded, and you feel what it's like to try to survive this moment when your world has been upended and you don't know what's going to happen and the future is so uncertain.
Well, you talked about feelings and how telling this story made you feel. When you were doing this research, which I think is incredible, 7 years of research, like you said, 100 books later, what kind of emotions did you feel? What emotions did it evoke from you about this past historical event?
I felt a lot of anger learning the history, because I had a vague idea that Mexico had lost half of its territory, to the United States, but I didn't know how it had come about. And I was angry as I learned the history that it was an unprovoked war, and that the president at the time, James Polk, he lied to Congress to get Congress to declare war on Mexico. And that made me angry, But I was also angry at the Mexicans, because during my research, I learned how the Mexican leaders were fighting amongst each other instead of uniting to fight against the United States. And learning that President Santa Anna was secretly collaborating with Polk as well, and he betrayed the Mexican people, so that also made me angry. But then as I finished the novel, I felt empowered by learning this history, because as a Mexican immigrant myself, living in California, I had often I had often felt that I was an outsider, that I didn't belong here, and that it was wrong for me to speak Spanish. And then learning the history and learning that California was once part of Mexico, and the Spanish was spoken here first before English, I realized that maybe I'm not the outsider that I was told I was.
Not at all.
And that maybe speaking Spanish is not, it's not wrong. It's not a bad thing. And so I felt empowered, and I decided, you know what, I belong here, and I have every right to make California my home.
And you absolutely do. And I'm so glad that you came to that realization through all of this work and writing this book. What do you hope readers take away from this novel?
Well, the novel offers a different perspective on this time period and this historical moment where I feel that in the U.S. it has been forgotten. You know, we don't talk about this invasion. We don't talk about how the U.S. Stole this land from Mexico, this territory. And for me, I feel that it's really important for us to remember this history, because that's how we're going to keep ourselves from repeating it, right? And, you know, we have been watching Russia invading Ukraine, and we have been very critical about what Russia has been doing there in Ukraine. And I feel that, well, we have had our share of invasions, beginning with invading Mexico. That was the first time the U.S. invaded a sovereign nation. And I feel that the only way we're going to learn from our past and stop repeating the mistakes of our past is by actually remembering this past, even if it makes us uncomfortable.
Which I 100% agree. And sometimes you have to be uncomfortable to grow. Well, now that you've released this novel, how is it different from some of the other books or other work that you've put out?
This novel is a complete departure from my previous work, because I have written contemporary fiction and I have written memoirs. And it's all been about, you know, my immigrant experience, and I write a lot about U.S. and Mexico relations, but through my own understanding and through my own experiences. But this was my first time writing historical fiction. And it was also my first time writing outside of my gender, because I write from a male perspective, and writing outside of my culture, because I write from the Irish perspective. But it was a really fun book to write. I learned a lot in the process, and I really do feel that, you know, we need to keep writing and reading more about our history.
100%,
so
yeah.
I definitely want to keep writing more historical fiction. And in fact, I was thinking about writing another novel about the Mexican-American War, but about the things that happened in California.
Wonderful. Well, we're looking forward to all of the work that is to come from you. But thank you so much for joining us here on Live in the Bay, Reyna.
Oh,